Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Parents Podcast. My name is Calvin.
And my name is Zena, and today we are joined by Andrew. So, Andrew, can you give us an introduction a bit about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for having me. I'm excited to be here. So my name is Andrew Beaulieu. I'm out of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I am an executive coach, an ICF associate credentialed coach, the CEO and founder of Bold Moves Coaching and Consulting. I spent my life working in my family business and working in construction, and my passion for people is what led me to coaching. Is really the fact that I was really always a servant leader, and when I got a chance to see the kind of impact I had on people's lives, I wanted to really extract that, making that my primary focus. So for the past 2 years, I've been building Bold Moves Coaching and Consulting, and went full-time effort in January of this year. So it's new and exciting for me in that sense, and I'm very happy to be here with you guys today.
2024, the year of going it alone, but exciting.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so can you share a bit more about like your family, your children, and like the personal side?
Personal side. So I've been with my wife for 20 years. We were high school sweethearts. Went to prom together. We just celebrated at the end of May our 12th wedding anniversary. And we are the lucky parents of two beautiful daughters, Nora, who is 8, and Claire, who is 6. They are everything. Anyone who has kids understand that when you make that decision to become responsible for a little human, it just becomes your focal and your priority. And for me, I love them to bits. And the pandemic brought me home to them, physically, emotionally, because as an entrepreneur, this is my second business, this new coaching world. But prior to that, I was an owner of the family business, and I was realizing that I was spending so much time outside of the household. And at that time, they were 2 and 4. So when I got back home through the pandemic and the lockdown, I recognized how much time I was missing, and I was missing all the small things. I was seeing them nights, if I was lucky, weekends mostly. And at that age, they're just doing huge leaps right from week to week. And so I recognize this is not the phase where I want to be away from my children. I want to be closer to them. And so that's part of the professional journey, I say. But on the other side, my wife's an only child, and with her 2 loving parents, and I'm the youngest of 4. I have 3 older siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. My 2 brothers and I were partners together in the family business, and my sister is a nurse who actually does some work for the family business as well. We keep everyone close together, but a big family when we're all together, and it's all about family, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's very much told us you're inspired of what took you down this entrepreneurial journey. So going on from that then, what have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced like in the early days of your business? So since, I guess, the start of 2024.
I'll even go prior to that. You're talking about some of the challenges I've had as a parent and an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go prior to that because actually I work full-time from home now. And so I'm living a phase of my life that is actually the most seamless. I see them to the bus in the morning. I get them off of the bus in the afternoon. We have breakfast together, supper together. So I'm more hands-on and more present than I've ever been. So I would say actually my challenges right now are few and far in between. But prior to working from home is really that time away. My wife and I had a game plan. We're going to have kids, and we're going to kind of copy the same social construct that our parents had, which the father will provide and the mother will stay home and take care of the kids. We see this time and time again. But you don't recognize how challenging having a child is going to be until you have a child. You don't know what kind of child you're going to get, what their temperament's going to be like, what kind of challenges you're going to face, and you're facing it for the first time. And so some of the challenges that we faced was we didn't adjust or communicate regularly enough how things were evolving and how quickly they're evolving. And what we recognize is with my time away from the family, and again, when it was one, it was manageable. Then we had a second child, and our second child is the challenging child. She's the one who'll test all limits at all the time. And it was at that time we didn't we didn't kind of regroup and say, okay, like, how's everything going? Are we good keeping this same kind of balance that we have right now? And it wasn't. What it was doing, it was draining my wife very slowly but surely, having 2 kids full time. I was out of the house, like I said, about 50, 60 hours a week because my office is an hour away drive. So 2 hours a day times 5 days, that's 10 hours right there. And so it was draining not only on her, but on our relationship. So we had to regroup. And again, part of the pandemic did that for us is when we got home and I was living it from my firsthand. I was still working full time, but I was trying to help out as much as possible. That's when I finally clicked. I'm like, this is a lot more challenging than I ever presumed it was, or that I ever really, she would communicate it, but I didn't fully grasp it because until you live it, you don't really understand it. And that's when we started having a little bit deeper conversations on like, how do we balance this a little bit more? How can I be more present at home as a father, as a parent figure? How can I help out more? So the biggest challenge was really that misunderstanding or misalignment in the earlier days of how exactly taxing it was to have 2 very young kids. I mean, 2 and 4 when at the start of the pandemic. So she basically had 4 years of solo parenting. She was a primary caregiver, but she was pretty much the sole caregiver for those 4 years.
Sure. So with your business as well, your ex business, how did that transition, like exiting that business? Because obviously, as it was a family business as well, did it go quite smooth, or did you have like complications with that as well?
I mean, there was emotional challenges for sure. So the structure of the business was my father was a founder of the business. He was a 50-50 owner with a non-family member. When my father was 10 years this gentleman's senior. So when my father retired in December of 2019, me and my 2 brothers who worked within the business took my father's 50%. And we made that decision together because we said, we're all in. It was started in 2016 that we started to do the change management. We were getting ready for his retirement. And so my brothers and I talked, we said, how are we all in? Do we all want this? Do we all want to become owners of this company? And we said yes. So when I made the decision to leave, you can imagine how that kind of pulled up some emotions because we made a commitment together and now I'm kind of retracting on it. So there was a lot of navigating those emotions with my siblings, but all in all, I ended up giving them an 18-month notice. So I told them in May of 2022, I said, I'm planning on leaving the business. I'm not in any hurry, but I am leaving the business. I'm going to go through a certification process, which is going to take me 12 months. I'm a key member of the company. We were a company of 70 employees and 35 in office that pretty much reported to me. So I said, I can't just leave in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it may be. You guys won't be ready and the company will suffer, the employees will suffer. And that's not how I want to leave my legacy. Mm-hmm. So we agreed on giving 18 months, which brought us to the end of the following fiscal year, November of 2023. And I think that was the best decision we made. It gave us time to communicate, to get aligned, to hire some key personnel as my replacements. We're able to ease the staff into this change versus ripping it off like a Band-Aid. It allowed me time to build my practice on the side. And so when we left, it was actually a celebration. It was a celebration saying Andrew's moving on to something he's passionate about. There was no resentment. There was no anger from my siblings, from my father, from our staff. I'm actually closer with a lot of the staff, closer today than I was when I was actually there with them 50 hours a week. The relationships grew and flourished once they realized that I was kind of just living into my own authenticity. And I think they respected the decision versus resented it.
Do you think, as your dad was the founder, that's like your childhood has impacted you as like an entrepreneur? Are you always destined to be an entrepreneur because your family was when you were younger, would you say? Would you say that's influenced your choice and decisions as well?
No, I think it absolutely influenced my choice. Seeing my father run a business, I mean, obviously that came with its own challenges, especially generationally. He was gone more often than he was home, but that was the social construct at the time. And as you see, I tried mirroring it and it didn't work for us, but it worked for them. But growing up, seeing my father have the flexibility and the independence and the freedom, once he established his business, got through that period, that grind period, once it came to a place where it was kind of running every year on its own with the staff running it, it definitely influenced my decision. I always saw myself as a business owner. Ironically enough, I never wanted to work in the family business. I had no necessarily interest towards construction. It was a general contracting business. I don't know if I mentioned that. So it was a construction business, and never interested me. But when I finished college, I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I kind of went to work for my father for the summer at an entry level position, and I was there for 16 years. I found fulfillment in things that wasn't construction related, which was working with people. I became a manager at 22. So I started at 20. By 22, I was a manager. Grew that department from me and another individual to a team of 16. Then became a director of the company. So then I had obviously multiple departments under my purview, and then became an owner, and then it was the entire company. So there's always just working with our staff, our clients, and our external subcontractors that propelled me forward. And one thing that people don't tell you, that if you find something you're good at, you automatically assume that's what you should be doing, right? If you're good at something and you're flourishing at it and you feel like you're seeing that growth, you say, well, this must be what I should be doing with my life. And it was a friend who told me, well, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's what you should be doing. And maybe you should be doing something else. And that was in line with the pandemic. So that was a conversation we were having over a supper one night. And so that's where I started to really hone in and say, what is it that I love about my current employment? And what could I do with that if it wasn't this? And that's kind of where I started that reflective process to become a coach.
I think that's really powerful. I think like a lot of people seem to fall into that trap of, oh, I'm good at this, so yeah, I must do it. And I guess a lot of the time it's following your parents, isn't it? It's what you've seen, what you've grown up with. You think that must be the right career for me because you're my parents. But of course, you know, that's not necessarily the case. And so going a bit more into like the family, balancing business and family, can you share a specific instance where you had to choose between a business commitment and a family commitment?
No, there's so many. The one that automatically jumped to mind was, when I first became a manager, I was managing our 24/7 maintenance and repair department. So whenever there was a flood or an after hours emergency, they would call me. And at the time I had a pager, and that's how far back we go. I had a pager on my belt, and it would ring, and I would have to stop whatever I was doing and tend to the emergency. And I can't tell you how many times there was a dinner, or I was putting my children to sleep, or doing bath time, that this pager would go off, and I would have to say, hon, can you take the children? I got to go tend to this emergency. And that's an awful feeling, by the way, to just have to say, like, this professional obligation is now taking me away from really what is most important to me. But a lot of people, I would say probably most people, don't really have a choice. This is my job. This is what pays my bills. This is what provides for me. I was in a unique position where I was working in a business that I won't say I had full job security, but I definitely had a lot more than most people probably would feel that they have. And I still felt that this was an obligation that I had to fulfill versus, well, I don't know what my other options are. Not handling the emergency is not exactly an option, but it just does create a lot of challenges. And this wasn't a one-of. This was frequent. Most emergencies are happening when stores were closing. So, supper time typically, or bedtime, or weekends when was my only time with them without distraction. So it was a lot of just reactive based, performance. It was this, I'm doing what I feel I have to do. But when you start to change that mindset of saying, I don't have to do this, I want to do this, your actions change, because you start to be a lot more intentional with what you want to do versus what you have to do. And that's something that my coach, I had a coach starting when we went through the change management. She said, you say the word you have to a lot. What do you have to actually do? Other than breathe and eat and sleep, the things that we have to do as humans, what do you have to do? And why do you say it that way? Do you want to do it? Is this what you want to be spending your time doing? Do you enjoy it? Do you get something more than just a paycheck at the end of the day? Is it fulfilling to you? And that was really eye-opening for me. We don't have to do what we do. We don't have to follow our parents. We don't have to live that same social construct that they did. We choose to. And when you empower yourself to make the power of choice, to choose what you want to do, what is in service of you, things that give you energy, things that, you know, you're happy to get up on Monday morning to go do, things start to change really quickly. Really quickly.
It's the same I always think with like need and want as well. Like you don't need that cake. And people say I need a coffee or I need a cake. And I think when you switch the mindset, you automatically feel so much better as well. And you don't then addict it again, I guess. And I want it, you know, in that sort of sense as well. Like you want it. You don't need the coffee. You want to have energy. You should have energy if you're being healthy and stuff as well. So I think it's always a good mind shift sort of switch, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, but we fall into habits, we fall into routines. That's something that, you know, when I started my coaching certification, that's the first thing we address. On a 12-month program, the first 8 months were focused on me as an individual. What are my habits? What are my routines, my behaviors? What are my tolerations? You know, the things that I just say, oh, I'll deal with that tomorrow. But as long as it's not dealt with, it's just sucking energy from you without you even realizing. You know, what are my boundaries? How do I communicate to other people what I am willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, and how do they reciprocate to that? So these are all things that you learn in a coaching certification, which is really all based out of communication and understanding how our body, our mind and body machines operate. Once you understand that, you feel so much more enriched and so much more empowered, because you start to change those little things that add up to big things. And that's why, you know, Bold Moves Coaching, that's why I went with that name of company. One, it was a bold move for me to leave the company, as people said, so that kind of stuck. But the bold move is not the presentation. It's not the display of a career change. It's not the leaving a bad relationship. Yes, these are all bold moves, but the bold move is all the small things you have to do prior to that big display. The bold move is saying no to something when you're usually this person who says yes. You know, that just a rough example, but it's the small things that you change that take courage, that take self-awareness, that take self-regulation, that are hard to do because you feel like there's an expectation that you should perform a certain way. How many people allow external expectations guide what they do with their lives? Oh, my parents think I should do this, so I'm going to go do this. I've heard that a million times. I've probably said it myself more than often than I'd care to admit. So these external expectations of ourselves, and just empowering ourselves to make these little changes to live a more fulfilling life, I think goes a long way.
Like the bold moves for me. I've been putting off video content for 2 years now. I'm guilty as charged, but my bold move is this podcast. It's sharing stories with other people. It's in a much more comfortable environment than me just doing a selfie video camera, because I cannot do that yet. But this feels like a step in the right direction. But yeah, so going on from that then, in terms of sort of like raising kids, they say it takes a village to raise kids, but sometimes everybody's villages look differently. So what does your village look like? What does your support network look like with your daughters?
The first few years of our daughters' lives were very, it was a very small village. My parents aren't very present in my kids' lives, their grandparents' lives. They see them at basically the holidays, and that's it. So my wife's parents are the most involved. But my mother-in-law got cancer the same year that my first daughter, that she was pregnant with our first daughter. And she went through remission. She's still around. She's healthy today. But so the first 2 years, there was a lot of separation because young kids get sick frequently, and you don't want, someone going through chemotherapy to get sick. And so, and there was a lot of emotion and anxiety around that. So the first few years, my wife and I felt like we were fairly alone. I mean, you're not bringing in a babysitter at that point. She doesn't have any siblings. My siblings have their own small kids that they were kind of going through. So the first few years, it was her and I. That was our community. And then the pandemic hit. And then you can't have a community because you're not allowed seeing anybody. But I was home, so at least there was that. We were home together, and we were co-parenting at that point. Coming on the flip side of the pandemic, the post-pandemic, if you will, our community has grown exponentially. Now my kids are older, so first off, they're more independent. They can do things for themselves. my wife's parents, my in-laws, are very healthy and they're very present. Very present. They're not far from us, so they're often around. We have now, a good selection of babysitters that we've tried and tested, and so there's that as well. And but a community is if you have access to one, it's definitely makes things a lot easier. And that's not only for being a parent. It's for every aspect of your life. And so my definition of community has changed a little bit over the past couple of years, where I always had this assumption that the people in my life, my friends, my family, had to be everything to me. Meaning, if I was going through something, they should show some interest in what I was going through, and show some empathy, show some interest, or some support and encouragement. And for the most part, I had that because I worked with my brothers, and we were there 16 years together, so there was a lot of familiarity, there was a lot of comfort there. But as I was leaving the family business, I didn't feel like I had that, especially not on the front end. And my friends didn't quite understand what I was going through. I mean, coaching's still fairly new to a lot of people. No one in my network is a coach. So I found new people. I found an extension of my community, people who were going through the certification program with me, people who understood what it takes to make these kind of changes, because a lot of them were going through career transitions themselves. Some were lawyers, some were pastors, some were engineers, and they're doing these significant changes to coaching as well. And I found a lot of solace in that. I found a lot of comfort in that, a lot of support in that. And that's just an example of you can have a community specific to a certain aspect or a certain area of your life. And you can have multiple of these that make up a larger community. So a community for having kids, absolutely. If you have access to it, it's definitely beneficial. If you don't, you need to communicate with your partner as much as possible and as frequently as possible to really understand what they're going through, and not to make any assumptions like my wife and I were making. She assumed I knew what she was going through, and I assumed that she had it no problem, like I thought she had it. We just weren't communicating effectively enough to make the other realize what they were going through. And so that, I think, is my message for any area of your life. Try and find your tribe, try to find your people for those specific areas of your life that will help you and encourage you and understand you. And that way you don't have to necessarily expect it from other people, because first off, you can't control what other people are going to do. And you don't know what they are thinking. You don't know if they even understand what you're going through. So there's this assumptions that are made.
I like that. Like, a lot of the times you come back to communicating with your wife is like that saved and resolved a lot that you were going through. Is there anything in particular you do, like in your day-to-day lives, to actively make sure you do communicate, or is it just sort of natural now?
Well, we have been together for 20 years, so we have picked up quite a few cues, let's say, but we're intentional about two things every day. Whether we're physically together or not, we do these two things. First thing in the morning is when we're having our tea. Yes, we drink tea here in Canada as well. When we drink our tea, we do our Wordle, the New York Times Wordle. We do that every morning. And so that is something that we bring, whether we're physically together or not. We'll even call each other and say, okay, you have your tea, I have my tea. Okay, let's do our Wordle. And we talk while we're doing it. We share. And so it's our time. It's something that we do together. And then in the evenings, often on our front gallery, if the weather's nice, if not, we'll do it in the living room. But we sit and we say, what was your favorite part of today? What's one thing that you can walk away from today that you're grateful for, that you enjoyed? And we do this with our daughters as well. At supper, we'll say, what was your favorite part today? Or a question I recently started asking them is, what was one thing you did today for someone else that made you feel good? And trying to get them into this, mindset of it being helpful towards others is really rewarding for us. And I want them to kind of get to that level of gratitude, saying, I'm grateful that the fact that I got an opportunity to help someone. So those are two things. One is the Wordle in the morning with my wife, and then kind of like, what was your favorite part of today in the evening? And that's usually just an icebreaker to more conversation. But we do this every day without fail.
I love that. And so going on, because obviously you said you involve the children in your gratitude, and do you involve your daughters in your entrepreneurial journey? Do you speak about business with them as well?
A little bit. So in my corporate world, my daughters knew about Gamma Construction. They visited the office. They knew what I did, so they had an understanding of what my roles were. In the coaching, I walk. There's a lot of creative things going on, and you're starting up a business. You're really creating every design, logos, templates, work programs, and so I do share it with them. Do they fully understand what it's for? Absolutely not. But they understand that I've left my old business, that I'm in this new business, that my job is to help people get through difficult phases of their life. And I definitely will show them some of the creative stuff just to get their ideas, because they're fantastic like that. All children just have these imaginations and this creative aspect that we have, but we've kind of maybe suppressed over years. So I'll involve them in that sense, and they know that I work from home, so that I'm always home, and they like that too.
And would you say you'd want your children to be entrepreneurs, or would you want them to go through a traditional route of like college, university, to get a job, or would you encourage them to be an entrepreneur, or would you go the other way?
Interesting. I would probably encourage them just to do whatever made them happy. That's my initial answer. I definitely will express to them maybe some of the advantages and disadvantages of being an entrepreneur versus an employee. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. But ultimately, I just want my children to be happy. And that's something that I feel this is the shift, and this is where the Gen Zs are getting it right, is they're no longer necessarily just looking at something as a paycheck and saying, well, I'll be able to provide X for my family if I do this. They'll say, what does it do for me? They're the first generation to come to an interview, how are you going to make me happier? And I think, although there might be a slight overcompensation in some situations, I think they have it right. We're starting to ask the right questions, because you live one life, and there is a difference between success, and there's a difference between success and fulfillment. Success is, I have the money, I have the house, I have the security, I have the car, I can take vacations with my family to nice places. Success is very external. It's very much showing what I have. And yes, you work hard for success. It's nice to have. Fulfillment is a necessity. To feel happy, to feel joy, to feel gratitude. These are things that are a must to live a happy and healthy life. Versus success, you don't need to necessarily have success to have a happy life. A nice hybrid of both is good. I would say that's healthy. But if you had to pick one over the other, you pick fulfillment over success, in my opinion. And that's something that the next generations and some of the millennials, we've caught on to this. There's more to just doing your job, being grateful for having a job and providing for your family, which was the boomer mentality, my father's mentality. That's why he didn't fully understand when I went this direction. It's like, you have, from a traditional standpoint, you have all the metrics of success. You're an owner operator of a business. You make good salary. You get dividends. You have benefits, perks, flexibility. Blah, blah, blah. I said, but it doesn't bring me fulfillment. Like, I get rid of all of that to just have that sense of waking up Monday morning saying I get to go do something I love. And so that's what I want my kids to know, is that, yes, I'd love you to have both. But if you have to pick, go for the fulfillment. Go through that thing that makes you the most happy.
So going on to a bit more about lessons in your journey, what would you say are some of the most important lessons you've learned as an entrepreneurial parent?
Being a parent helped me become a better leader. When you become a parent, you acquire this patience, a level of empathy, a different type of communication, in the sense that you stop assuming that your children know what you're talking about. So you tend to ask more questions. You understand, like you're not in a rush like you are in a workplace. In a workplace, someone comes to ask you a question, you give them an answer, and you send them on your way. And that's why coaching and parenting go really well together, because in coaching, you don't advise, you ask questions. And you take the time to help the person get from point A to point B on their own. Because how they get to their answer is going to be really specific to them. And you don't know their context, you don't know their experiences, you don't know their lives as well as they do. So it's inappropriate for you to give someone advice. Prior to kids, I didn't have that patience, because I was used to just telling people what to do. don't tell kids what to do. You explain to kids. You sit with them, and you allow time to kind of just take the time it takes. Not to say that I'm perfect and I do that every time. And I'll be honest. Sometimes you got to get your shoes on. You got to get in the car because I said so. But when you can, and you just take this time to really to be patient with your children and listen to them and communicate and explain things to them, that translates into your professional competencies as well. I would say being a parent has made me a much better leader, and being a leader made me a much better parent as well. They really go hand in hand. But again, it's something I would have never have fathomed prior to becoming a parent. I didn't think that one was going to translate to the other, but it very much does. It enhances your soft skills.
Do you think that then when you were in your family business, because of course there was like 8 years roughly before your first daughter was born that you were working there, do you think any of the staff, or did any of the staff or your siblings ever say to you, you are noticeably different, or like there's changes in you after you had the daughters?
I don't know if it's cause and effect. So when I had my first daughter was also the same time we were going through change management. So it was the first time I worked with a coach, and we did one of those 360 evaluations at that time. And my the ones with the yellow, green, red, and blue. And my colors came back fairly balanced, but the feedback I got from some peers, some direct reports, was that Andrew has a tendency, he hides in the shadows of his brother. He has so much potential, but he's not tapping into it. I was always a fairly good communicator, and I was always a servant leader. So I was always in service of my staff, even from a young age when I became a manager at 22. That was always the style I adopted. How can I make your job better? How can I make your experience here more enjoyable? So being a parent didn't bring that to me. I already kind of had that. And then, so that 360 came out saying, Andrew, you need to step out of the shadow of your brothers, was the same year I had my daughter. Didn't take very long for things to kick into gear for me. And to the point when my father retired, so we got that in 2016. In 2019, when my father retired, not only did my father elect me, the youngest of the 3 brothers, to become his appointed successor, his partner voted me as well to be his point of contact. She says, I'm not dealing with 3 brothers. I only want to deal with one of you. And so I was appointed by both my father and his partner, Robert. And I think that was very telling. Because I was more level-headed, because I had this communication, this patience, this empathy. Now, was it because I became a parent, or was it maturity? Was it the coaching? It's probably a blend of a little bit, all of it. But there was definitely a noticeable change for whatever reason.
Would you say like new people who are looking to, start their own business, they've already got kids, young kids, or maybe children, 5 or 6. So what advice would you give to them when they're starting their business? Like pure advice from the heart.
So this is actually a program that I'm creating right now, which is called the Leadership Wellness Program. And it's putting leaders back in the mindset that, the program is essentially to allow leaders to be more present and effective at home with their partner, with their children, and more present and effective in the office for their teams. And what motivated this was we're seeing so much reports of employees coming out saying 70% in North America, I don't know what it is in the UK, but 70% of the workforce in North America are disengaged. So they're actively looking for new jobs, or they're quiet quitting, I believe is the term, or they're just filling a chair and collecting their paycheck. And their number one reason was for saying my relationship with my direct supervisor. So it put me in the mindset saying, if I'm a leader and my staff is feeling like I'm not present, and I'm trying to be whatever I can to them, but I have a young family at home, my wife needs me, my children don't get to see enough of me, so I got to go there, and I feel like I'm being stretched between everybody and not pleasing anybody. Coincidentally, we saw last year the highest number of burnouts in leaders that we've seen in years. So there has to be a correlation there. They're just trying to be everything to everybody and falling short. So I'm designing this leadership wellness program. And so to get to your question, the number one thing is you need to take care of yourself. If you ask a leader who their number one priorities, a leader who is also a parent and has a partner at home, what's their number one priority? They're not at the top of their list. But I'll use the airplane analogy. You need to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can put it on somebody else, and that includes a child. That includes your elderly, that includes your partner. Because if you are not taking care of yourself, if you're not, taking care of your health, you're not sleeping enough, you're not eating well, you're not exercising, you're not doing the basics, or you're not making intentional time to be present and attentive to your children, your wife, or to the people in your office. If you're not working on these relationships, fostering healthy habits, you continuously do this, you're depleting your own tank. And so to actually show up to someone is 10 times harder than would have been if you actually just invested in yourself. So it's counterintuitive, but in order to make other people happy, you need to focus on yourself. So that my advice to a new leader who's always got a young family home is you have to make time for yourself. It is healthy. You need to practice healthy habits so that you can show up better for everyone in your community, in your relationships.
I do agree with that a lot. Obviously, yeah, it almost feels selfish, but actually it's selfless.
Yeah.
I think you could say, because if you're feeling better, you can be better for everybody else as well.
Absolutely.
It's an investment. It's a different kind of investment. And so if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self when you were just starting out in your family business? So knowing what you know.
I think I would have spent more time asking questions. Asking questions to my wife, asking questions to my partners, and to my father, potentially, who was a business owner with 4 young kids at one point in time. He started the company when I was 7, and I'm the youngest. So there's 7 years difference between me and my brother. So he is 14 to 7 years old. How did he go about managing the business? What kind of sacrifices does it take? What does that look like? I think I would have spent more time asking questions and making less assumptions. Assuming that because my wife and I said I was going to work and she was going to stay home, that was the deal. There's no room for flexibility, right? It was like a rigid agreement that we both just assumed that's the agreement. These are the rules we made, so we have to play by these rules. That's not the case. That's not how life works. So life evolves every day. Things change. Some things are in our control, some things that are not in our control. So I would tell myself to not rush into anything and to just ask more questions. And to weigh your options better in that sense. I don't think I would have changed going into the ownership of the business. I think I would have changed perhaps how much energy I spent in the office versus coming home earlier and being more present and establishing a boundary, right? That would have been a healthy boundary for me to establish to my partners, to my staff, saying, like, I have young kids at home and they need me. But there was a point of pride there, if I'm honest, the point of pride that I felt needed at the office, that I was an important individual growing up the corporate ladder, which is what a lot of people strive for, understandably. And so there was something that was servicing me. Either it was my ego or my ambition. It was fueling me in different ways, but I was not taking into consideration the impact it was having on those around me.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It sounds like a lot is just more thinking about it, having those boundaries. And yeah, a lot of people tend to jump straight into things and dive straight in. And yeah,
it's not really thinking anymore. I think other people just, try to have such a fast life that they just change. And I think, you don't all change will come, as it is anyway. You can't really stop change. So, but you can stop the ones which you can, change as well. So it's really interesting.
I equate it to... Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, I equate it to the person who's offered a promotion and they accept it just because they feel it's the next natural evolution in their career, even though they're fully satisfied, in fact, possibly even more fulfilled there than they will be growing up the corporate ladder. That's someone who has the most experience, the most seniority in the company. They're like, well, we'd like to promote you to management. But they're fully content with the salary they're making. They're fully content with the work they're doing. They enjoy the type of work, but they accept the promotion regardless because they feel that's just the next natural evolution. Well, if I don't accept it, what does that mean about my future? Not realizing that when you go to management, and this is just a rough example, but if you go to management, the dynamics with your with your staff change. The expectations between you and the stakeholders change. Your role completely changes if in the field of construction where you're a project manager and now you're becoming a manager, but you're no longer project managing, you're managing those project managing. And so the roles and responsibilities change, but people still tend to accept it just because they feel it's a natural progression in their careers. It's okay to be happy where you are. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're less of a professional or less of a person because you said, I'm very content with the life I've made for myself. That's actually a point of pride. Someone who's like, hey, I built this for myself. I'm very proud of this, and I'm good keeping it the way it is for now. I think there says a lot about someone's integrity if they can do that.
Because I think not everyone can be entrepreneurs in the world, and if people are happy in a stable job or reading every day, that's completely fine as well. And I think it's about normalizing it all, because if you're on social media, you think everyone's self-employed and everyone's doing their own thing. And on that as well, would you say from your whole journey of entrepreneurship, being a parent as well, you've had any main regrets which you think back on from all of that?
Any regrets? Well, short of again setting up those boundaries when my kids were a bit younger, I would say that would be my only one. I don't regret how long I stayed with the family business, even because I think it was through that evolution that I found my passion. I was never one of those kids that woke up and said, I want to be X when I grow up. Like, I didn't have that, right? For whatever reason. So I found that through my evolution within the family business. Now, my encouragement to, say, for example, my daughters is try to do as many different things at a younger age as possible to expose yourself to different things, because you'll learn what you like and you don't like only by trying it. I wasn't exposed to a lot of different things. My uncles worked in the family business. My dad was in the family business. My mom didn't have a career. So I wasn't necessarily surrounded by people who had a lot of different interesting professional careers. But working through the family business, I found what my strengths are and what my interests really are with people. And when I went into coaching, I even told my coach and my wife, I said, I'm going to try it. If I don't like it, I'll pivot. Found it, I really enjoy it. I really get fulfilled for it. So I guess I'm lucky in that sense. I guess the regrets would be your kids are only young for so long. This is a phase. And I know when we're in it, like I'm in it now, it seems long, but it's not long. It flips by in the blink of an eye. There'll be a time in my life that if I want to go do the 50, 60-hour weeks away from my family and not be present, there'll be a time for that when my kids are older and have their own lives. And my wife is becoming a pilot right now. We can talk about that. But in the pandemic, she made the decision to become a pilot, an airline pilot. So she is now a private pilot, and she's working on her commercial license right now. In fact, she just left to go fly. Yeah, exactly. So there'll be a time where, my kids will be out of the house and my wife's going to be working for Air Canada, whoever they're working, traveling the world, and I'll be able to go put my effort in professional activities that so well please me at that time, or not. That's my choice. But I think when your kids are young, at least what this was for me was being present for them, building strong, healthy relationships with my kids. I'm fortunate enough that when the pandemic hit, my kids were 2 and 4. They're not going to remember a period of time that I wasn't home. That's a blessing in its own right. I'm happy to say that they're not going to remember that, because that wouldn't be a point of pride. I remember my father not being home for 50, 60 hours a week. I remember him coming home drained, tired, and plopping on the couch and had nothing left to give. I don't want that to be what my kids remember of me. I'm fortunate enough that I caught it quickly enough, let's say. It's strange to say that the pandemic offered some blessings in that regard. Yes, it was horrible, but it also brought me home physically and emotionally to my kids and my wife. I don't know if I have any regrets, though, because I think everything kind of evolves in the way it's meant to evolve. Would I do things better? Yes, but I don't think I regret doing it.
The trouble is sometimes regret doesn't do much, because you can't go back and change in the past. But what you can do is you can learn from it, like what you've done. And a couple of things with your own children, because obviously we've got 2 young children, and a lot of people would say to me, the days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah.
And that's quite a savage saying because it really hits your heart and you're like, okay, yeah, that is very, very true. Because then all of a sudden, yeah, our eldest is 3 and that already feels too old.
Yeah, I remember, we're still there. I think we're human beings. We need to give ourselves permission to, I'm not going to be the perfect dad all the time, far from it. But when you're able to catch yourself and you're able to take that time, like when my wife asked me yesterday, what was your favorite part of today? I had a round of goldfish with my 2 kids. Like we just played some cards for 10, 15 minutes. It was the favorite part of my day because it was just good conversation and it was fun. I don't always have the energy. I don't always make the energy or time to do that, even if they ask. So again, I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I give myself permission to not be perfect and to just reflect and think, how can I do better when I catch myself in the moment? And we talk to our kids like they're adults, like in the sense that I will own up to my kids and say, I don't feel like I was a good dad today. I don't think I did a good job. I'm sorry. And like, feel free to call me out on that if you see that, I'm too distracted by my phone or, I'm working too much or whatever it may be. Like, come get me and tell me, Dad, like you're doing what you said you didn't want to do. I kind of include them in that sense, and I treat them with the respect that they deserve. And sometimes they feel a little too loose-tongued to do it, but that's okay. I'd rather that than them not say anything at all. It's a work in progress. We learn every day, we adjust every day, but those relationships that I'm building with them now will be what will stand the test of time because we're together now. It's too late when they're 16, 17. You say, okay, now I'm going to try and include myself in your life. That's harder at that point in time because their foundation is built.
Exactly. It's like, I think somebody said 18 summers is all you get. But actually, in reality, it's probably more like 12, if that. Because then, of course, priorities change. Their community and circle becomes bigger. Like we said, like obviously at the start, mum and dad are the best things since sliced bread, and then all of a sudden they're not anymore. And yeah, you've got to cherish every little moment. So going on with that, what sort of legacy do you hope to leave behind for your children and your business?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish I prepared for that question.
It's better on the spot.
Do you intend to scale the coaching, or do you just see yourself just you?
I'd like to scale the business. I would definitely, my intention is to grow the business because I believe that will give me some more flexibility and freedom. Right, the business right now is me. So if I take a day to be with the kids, the business isn't growing. Versus if you scale it, you kind of have some freedom and flexibility in that sense. Obviously, that comes with other challenges, and I'm aware of those as well. Coming from a business that had 70 employees, the legacy I want to leave my kids, or that I want them to walk away with right now, is that you're never too old to make a change for something that you feel will bring you something, more fulfillment, more success, whatever it is that they're striving for. You're never too late to make that change. And my wife and I are both role models of that. We're 37, both of us, and we just changed our careers. Regardless of where we were, we're making a 90-degree, 180-degree pivot to go to something that we believe is going to service us better. And so that's definitely one thing I want my kids to walk away with, say you're never too old to learn something new or try something new, or to try and I hate to say the word fail, but try and fail, try and fall down and dust yourself off and keep on going. And that just have fun. That was something I was able to bring into my corporate world and the family business. I don't want to say I was the class clown in a sense, but my job was to make people feel like it was a good, fun, creative place to be where they could come and be themselves and just do what they love to do. And I want to bring that into my coaching practice as well. As whenever I'm working with a client, I'm like, this is a fun process. Like, we can enjoy ourselves here. It's important to enjoy life. You don't know what tomorrow holds. I hate to say that. It sounds cliche, but it's true. We don't know what tomorrow holds. So just enjoy what you're doing as much as you possibly can, and don't be afraid to pivot.
So on that as well, then, what would you say for like people listening? What should like your typical day you a very early morning person? You journal, meditate, or is it completely different to what you see on social media and stuff?
I drop off my kids at 8. I come home. I have my tea with my wife. We do our Wordle. I'm in front of my laptop usually by 8:30, 9 a.m. Pick up the girls at 4:20. So I usually log off around 4 o'clock, start getting supper on the go. Sometimes I'll work in the evening, sometimes I won't. So the brunt of my work is happening between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. I make myself accessible to clients on nights and weekends, but book not for emergencies, for bookings. So when those happen, we just coordinate with my wife that I'll be on an hour call here and there. But I'm physically home, which is really helpful. The majority, I would say 90% of my work is remote. There's 10% that want in-person coaching. That may change in time because as we see, there's I won't say a movement, but people are starting to ask people to come more into office these days. They're starting to move away from the remote working. So that may change in time and we'll adjust accordingly. I can't control what's going to happen. But, your brain can do 4 to 5 hours of hard cognitive work every day. 4 to 5 hours. The people doing 10, 12-hour days, you're not more productive than the guy just doing 5 solid productive hours a day. You have a lot of wasted time in there. You have a lot of time where your brain fogs over and you're not actually doing anything. You're not putting any output in. So there's no benefit to doing these long days. Structure your days to be effective in the hours you give yourself and forget about the rest. This is not, obviously there's exceptions to every rule. You're going to have days where you want to do something more. And if you want to do it, great. You don't have to do it. You want to do it. If you want to do it, go for it. But I allow myself 9 to 4 as my regular schedule.
So, I know we've spoken a lot about challenges side, something a little bit more lighthearted. Do you have any funny or memorable stories that you've had about juggling, parenting, and entrepreneurship?
Oh my goodness. Funny story. Well, I've brought my kids to work many times. Back in the corporate world, I'd bring them in and sit them down because they have a day off from school and grandparents are busy or what have you. So we bring them in and those were always very fun days. It gets everyone very happy because when you get to, you build relationships with your coworkers, but when you get to meet their families as well, obviously those relationships, they deepen. So I always really enjoyed bringing them to work and showcasing them. I still go back to the office, even though I don't work there anymore. I still go by to visit and I'll bring them every now and then. And people really love that. I think that would be the highlight moments. I've been on Zoom calls and they walk in the back, of course, and they come ask. And even though they see the doors closed, they still come in. No, Dad, I need help. And people are just very understanding about that now since the pandemic. Like it's just a way of life. And it doesn't embarrass me. It's saying, look, I have 2 kids. They're here and they're my priority. Like I have my dog right there. Like it's a way of life right now.
And for just into the end as well, like for someone who's interested in sort of like coaching and taking your services, like how could you help the average person who's in employment, for example, they're looking to go entrepreneurship? How could you help them overcome certain barriers in what you do?
Well, so everybody's going to have their own specific scenario. So as a coach, what we start with is we take basically self-awareness assessments, and we have different tools that we use. What we want to do is identify where you are today. What's point A, and what area of your life could be holding you back or making you feel stuck on why you can't make that that leap to point B that you want to pursue. So for someone, for example, who wants to start up a new business, what are their current financial situation and can you sustain that for how long? If they're going through rough points in their relationships, is now the time you want to make that move because those relationships are going to suck a lot of energy and a lot of focus away from you. So what we do is we do a holistic or comprehensive evaluation of every area of your life at this point in time. Then we identify where you want to be and we create an action plan, but the action plan is breaking down into such small bite sizes. They're able to build daily momentum, and that daily momentum just creates positive behaviors and they move forward. That's obviously very simplistic, but every situation is different because everyone's context, everyone's background, everyone's belief systems, everything is different. We talked about communities before. Everyone's is different. So we need to assess what you have now available to you and then fill in the gaps. If you're missing a community, where can we find your community? I'm not saying we're going to do it without it. We're going to try and find it, and we're going to try to make you as whole as possible. The analogy we use is the wheel of a car, right? Your cars are most efficient when they're driving 100 kilometers an hour. Are you guys in kilometers or miles? 100 kilometers an hour on the highway with 4 tires are well pumped up full of air. The second your tire starts to lose air, you're now doing 30 kilometers on the side streets and hoping your tire doesn't pop. That's the same thing when we look at your wheel of life and looking at all the areas of your life. If you're full, you're operating at efficiency. But if you're depleted in certain areas of your life, we need to look at those. And how do we get them back to as full as possible so you can be the most efficient version of yourself to get to your ultimate goal. Coaching is just another tool in our belts, but I personally feel it's the most impactful for change. Because it's change that time and time again is sustainable because it's coming from something that's true to you. And, you can get a mentor, you can get a consultant. They're going to show you what to do, what they've done, what not to do, and then they're going to leave. Where coaching is a partnership that will work through it with you, and you'll come to conclusions, and you'll have that partnership with a coach who's there that whole step of the way. And that's why coaching is so unique. It's a different form of communication that just shows sustainability over time.
So to end it, going forward as your episode 1, we would like to keep something going for all of our guests on our podcast. So we want you to pass on your favorite quote, one quote which has stuck with you, and we will share it at the start of our next podcast.
I love that. So the quote, this comes to me right away. The quote that I've been using for the past 2 years is a quote by Jim Rohn, and it says, "Happiness is not by chance, it's by choice."
Bold. That's a bold move right now.
Today, isn't it? Bold.
That's right. That's right. I thank you both for episode 1. It's such an honor and to get to meet you and be part of this episode. And the Entrepreneurial Parent Podcast is something that the world needs right now. I think your timing couldn't be better.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. And brilliant.
Thanks for having me.